So for the report builder, I can get to it in the same way I got to alarms and everything else. Just double click on reports on the left here. And now I can create a report just by clicking the plus sign here to add a graphical report. So it starts us off with, with report page 1. We can add additional pages. We can click on printer settings, and we can change it to landscape. You do find this under printer settings, which might not be the first place you look for it, but that's how you change orientation. This is how you change the location. You can change it to save the report into USB, local SD card, or somewhere else. You can also even change things like the margins. So if I wanted to be size-fixed, that's how I would decide that. So this is the first page of my report. If I double click on it, I get this report editor, which looks really similar to a JMobile page. These are our margins at the top, so I can edit anything within the margins. And if I open up the widget gallery, we'll see that there are a few widgets here, but the main one we want to use is this thing under entries, which is a screenshot. I clicked on something here. Okay. So this is how we can add a screenshot. So in this case, what page 1 of my report would be is a screenshot of the screen, whatever screen is showing at the time the report is generated. It would just be this thing, and we would see the report show that. Now, if instead of an actual screenshot, maybe I just want to put some widgets, I can go into here and add whichever widgets I want to add to create kind of a custom report. You'll notice that not all of the widgets are actually here. However, we can still use things that aren't here. So, for example, trends isn't on this list, but if I add my trend widget back, we'll see that I can actually just copy and paste this into my report, and you can add pretty much anything onto it. So the difference between putting a screenshot and actually adding the widgets is that you can move them around. The screenshot's just going to show it was on the screen, but you could add these to kind of lay out something that looks like a document with whatever numbers those tags were showing during real time. So there's really a lot that you can do and customize with this, and it's going to save this report in whichever location I defined as a PDF file. So to generate that report, I have actions to do this, and they're actually under print or something. Yeah, print, which again might not be the first place you look, but print graphic report. This is how you generate the report. So I only have one report. I would just select report 1. You select the file name. This is again the time. You could make it something else, but if you make it something else, it's just going to keep overwriting. If you just call it report 1, the next time you generate the report, it's going to overwrite it. So that's why it's always defaulted to be the date. And the folder path, you can just type in something like USB memory, or you can even make this the value of a tag in case you want it to be changing. It's sometimes saved to USB memory, sometimes saved to somewhere else. I guess I can demo this real quick just by downloading to one of my panels. So I'm going to go ahead and make this go to this location here, QTHMI workspace dump, or maybe USB would be better. I'll just do that. So I'm downloading to my Exor, and it's going to go to that QTHMI workspace dump folder. To kind of go on a little tangent here, I'm just going to open up that file in WinSCP so that we can see that it was generated. I think that file is in a protected folder, which means I might not be able to extract it using this. If that does happen, I'll show how we can get around it. But basically, I want to generate my report by pressing that button, and I should see data, HMI, QTHMI, and deploy. Oh, I don't want that. I'll just do a custom path. So MNT data, I think would be good. All right, so MNT data, that's where I am now. Something did just pop up, Project 99 graphical report. Obviously, I can't open a PDF in WinSCP, but maybe I'll just put it somewhere in here that I can find. This is a little bit of a tangent, but this is using WinSCP or FTP. I just wanted to actually show the PDF. So here's my report. So we can just see this little screen I made here, and then the second one I made with the numbers. So once you get this report, you can see it just becomes a PDF at whatever location you decided. You can do whatever you want with it. From there, you can send the PDF actually as an email, which is something that people are doing a lot. Obviously, you can just extract it. You can put it on a USB stick and then do whatever you need to do with it from there. So I think probably that's a good overview for generating the reports. Okay. So next is user management and security. I mentioned earlier making some kind of page with maybe alarm information or some settings that we want only the administrator to be able to get. So I'll just put one of these things in on my admin page. And actually, a good example, which is building off of what we did in the basic training, is to have a button which lets us access the system settings on this admin page as well. So as a reminder, if we go to project properties, if we want to set up a button that does that, we go into project properties and we find the macro for it. So normally in JMobile, whenever JMobile is running, I'll just show real quick here. If we touch and hold, we get this context menu. Maybe mine's not working with the right click. There it is. So then this is how we can get the system settings. But most often, you're not going to want to expose that just to any user. So in the project properties page, if we find this context menu field, you can change it. On delay means that it's going to turn on and off with that touch and hold. but we can change that to on action instead. And this button, I'm going to use the context menu action to show the context menu. I know I went through that kind of quick, but we did do it in the basic training. So there's a video as well for that. But basically, I just wanted to have a couple things here on my admin page that makes sense for only the admin to be able to get to. So keep in mind that if you have some kind of page template that just changes to the next page, like what we did in the basic training, then people would still be able to get to page 3 because page 1 next page would just change you to page 3. So if you are setting up your pages this way, you would want to set up page navigation a little bit differently. But basically what we've created is a page that is intended to be for administrators only. So we want to make sure that only administrators can get there. That's kind of how we protect them. So I've added a button, and that button is just going to be load page page 3, and it's simple page navigation. This button takes us to page 3. Now, if we don't do anything with this button, then anyone is going to be able to get to it. So what we need to do is make it so that not all types of users can get to this button. And to do that, we are going to want to set up some user security. So in the security tab on the left here, we have user groups and users. Ignore audit trail for now. But user groups are types of users like administrators, guests. Maybe this is like maintenance or something like that would be good to use. And these are groups of users that have certain access types. So we can make it so that button can be seen by an admin, but not seen by a maintenance user. Or we can make it so that button is seen by a maintenance user, but they can't press it, and an admin can press it. So we have 3 types of access. We have full access, which just lets everyone do everything with it. We have hide, which makes it completely not visible, not usable by a certain type of user. And we have read only, which lets that type of user see the button or see whatever it is, but they can't do anything with it. They can just see it only. So I've created another user type, and whenever I click on users, we see the types of users that we have that are actually able to log in. So we have admin. This is the default user, which means this is the user that will be logged in when this project is started up. By default, your default user is always admin, so this is probably something you want to change. But I'm just going to add another user called user1. I'm going to change his group to maintenance, and I want him to be the default user instead, so I just check this off. So now whenever I turn my project on, user1 will be logged in and not admin. If I make no default user, then no one will be logged in, and it will boot up to a login screen. So I'll show what that looks like too. We do have to define a password. I'll just make it password. It's possible to change the password at runtime, which I'll show too, which is why we have some fields way over to the right here that decide like what our password needs to be. Minimum length, maximum, or there's no maximum length, but must contain numbers and special characters and things like that. You can even make it so they have to change the password every so often. And we can export and import some of, well, actually we can export and import all of these, but these are encrypted. So what happens is if we export this, you get a file that is just like an RSA key with just a bunch of random letters and numbers. But if you import that key in, then it'll import the information. And I never actually know what this password is. Well, I know because I just added it, but if I add someone else's project and their password was something else, there's no way that I could extract it because it's protected by that RSA crypto. So now that I have some users set up in user groups, I can make it so that this button is invisible to some of them. The easiest way to do this, and there's two ways that I'll show both of, but the easier way is to just right-click on this button and find security settings. And from security settings, I can click on whichever user type I want to edit it on. Now, by default, these just go to what's called the base settings, which is usually just going to be full access. But if I want to change it by clicking on maintenance, then we have the widget that I just clicked on, which is the button, and I can change the permission. So base settings is full access, but I just want to hide it from them. So if I change this to hide, then my maintenance user, user1, is never going to see this button. So next, I just need to have a way to change the user. I can do that with an action. So this button here, I can add an action to it when it is clicked. Scroll all the way down to the bottom and find user management and add to it one of these user management actions. So log out is going to just log out the current user and bring up a login page. Switch user does almost the same thing, except it doesn't log the user out. It just lets you go to the login page. There is a difference because if you go to switch user, there's a back button, and you can click that back button to get back into the project as your current user. If you log out and then you don't remember the password or whatever, then you're logged out and you might not be able to get back in until you remember the password. Reset password, this takes you to a different page where you can reset the password. Most of these things you want to expose only to administrators, of course, but you can add additional users during runtime. You can delete a user during runtime. You can edit a user during runtime. This means edit their permission type, edit their password. It's the same with reset password, that's during runtime. Change password, that's during runtime. And delete the dynamic file. What this is any of these changes that you're making during runtime get stored into this file called the dynamic file. And if you decide to delete it, then any of your changes are gone. So if I add a user and then delete this, the user is gone. But you can save that if you just export the file, which is what this does. And then, of course, you can import a file at a later time. So I'm just going to use switch user because that is really all I want to do is just log in as a different user. And it should be good from there. So I'm logged in as my default user, which is the maintenance guy. He has no access to this button. Even though I know it's there, I still can't click on it. I know it's supposed to be there. So I want to log in as the admin. I click the pink button, and now I'm back to the login screen. I did use switch user, so I can go back. If I did log out, there'd be no back, so I could get stuck. And admin is just admin. The default password for admin is admin, which is probably something to change. But now I can sign in, and I can get to my my admin page. I mentioned that there's two ways to set this up. That was the easier way. The usually not easier way is to go to your user groups page, scroll all the way over to the right, and find the authorization settings. So the last one here is my maintenance user. If I click in it and click this square, I get my maintenance user authorization settings. This shows me literally everything in the project. If I go to page 1, I have my buttons. Page 3, I have my table and my other stuff. And I can actually go through each of these and change the settings for this user type. This could be faster in some cases if you happen to just have a lot of things that you want to hide from certain users, but most of the time you're only going to be hiding a few of these things. So that's just why I say the right-click method is usually easier than this method, but this can be good too in some situations. So next I'm going to go back to users and take away the default user. So now there's no default user. On my admin page, I guess I can make a couple more buttons here that do some interesting things. So user management, I want to edit users with one of these buttons just to show what that page looks like. And how about add a user, I think would be another good one. So user management, add user. So this time I logged in with no user. So this takes us to the login page. This is the one I said that you could get stuck at. But this is also a way that you can make it so that someone has to log in when the project is turned on. So this took me just to the first page, which I have this button because I am signed in as the admin. I have the two buttons that I just created. This one is going to take me to edit user page. So this is how I can edit a user. If I want to change user one's password to something else, I can do that. I can change his user group. I could make him an admin if I wanted to. And this is how I can add a user. So if I want to add user 2, make him maintenance, then I can add user 2. So now 2 users exist in this project, but 2 users exist only during runtime. So when I turn the HMI off, or in this case when I X out, user 2, it no longer exists. And the only way that I can keep him is by using that export user data action, because he's part of the dynamic file. So now he's gone. You can see that he doesn't get added into runtime or anything. He's just not there. Those pages that I showed can be edited in a little bit of a hard way to get, so I'll show how to get to those. But it is possible to edit those login pages to look however you want them to look, which is something people do a lot. So if you go to your project location, which mine was JMobile Suite Workspace, this is kind of the default path. And go to your project. This is my project, user management templates. Double click here. And now you actually see all of the files that I was just playing with. So these files aren't exposed anywhere in JMobile. You have to get to them in your project file. So again, mine was JMobile Suite Workspace, project name, user management templates, and then I found these. So I want to edit the add user template, for example. I just click and drag it into JMobile, and now it's here. So probably I don't want to change things like the username, but if you want to like add your logo or something, or change the colors of these, change the formatting of the buttons, then these are all safe. Maybe is the word. These are all safe things to do without changing the behavior here. And if you do mess it up by accident, you can just create a new JMobile project and take one of these files from your other project and paste it into here, so you get your page back to how it's supposed to be. The last thing I want to show for user management is how you can create a tag that shows the logged in user. So under basic, I'm just going to add this numeric field, and I can find under System, as a system variable, we have User Management. This is showing a lot of those fields associated with the user. We even have things like a username list, but if I pick this client ID, this is going to show the name of the logged in user. So if I simulate this one last time, and I go in as user 1, then we can see that I made a mistake. Oh, this client username. Okay, so it's this client username, not ID, not the first thing that I put. So that'll be it for user management. Next, I'll do JavaScript, and if there's time, I'll do multi-language, which is pretty quick anyway. So for JavaScript, obviously we can't show everything that you would ever do in JavaScript, but I am just going to show the important things that we would use JavaScript for and how we would do those things. So just to kind of set that up, I'm going to put some tags here. And I need to execute my JavaScript. So at the top of pretty much every action list, probably every action list, we always have JavaScript. So if I actually decide to use that, then it's going to create some JavaScript that is executed when that action is performed, and it gives us a little function block here to start writing our JavaScript in. So there are really two main JavaScript functions that you need to understand to use with JMobile, or else you won't really be able to do anything with JavaScript. So the first one is project.getTag. This allows us to get the value of a tag and use it in JavaScript. The second one is project.setTag. This allows us to set the value of a tag, take a number in JavaScript and send it to a tag value. So I'm going to use both of these here first. Type in project dot, and whenever we start doing that, we get a little helper thing here from the IDE, but I want set tag, so I can either click on it here or just keep typing it in. This is case sensitive, so you have to put the capital T, and then it will open up my project.setTag function. You can see that as I'm doing this, the IDE helps me a little bit, and it shows the parameters. Some of these parameters are optional. It will override if I don't use these ones here, and it'll just take the necessary tags. Really, there's only two necessary tags for project.setTag, which is the tag name that we're setting to and the value that we're setting. We can look at these in the help menu a little bit to show where to find this stuff. But force write would usually just be like a true to show that it's writing, and index could be a number if that's valid. But for here, I just want to set a tag. So my tag name, which needs to be in quotes, was short2, I think, short2. So that's the first parameter is the tag name, and the second parameter is the number that I want to set. This will just be a 10. I'll start with just a number. So if I simulate that, then we should see this field here turn into a 10 when I click on the button. I'm going to get rid of this. So click on the button, and it does turn into a 10. So next, I want to show how we would do that instead of a static number, but with a variable. So I'm going to create a variable. I'll just call it x and set x equal to, use 12 this time. And instead of typing that number in, I can just add x. So what this is doing is it's creating a variable with this number and storing it here into the tag. If you're not used to JavaScript, but you are used to some languages like Java or C++, this would look a little bit different than what you're used to, because variable types in JavaScript are declared dynamically and not by the user. What that means is that if x is given a number, then JavaScript is going to decide what data type it should be. So if it's a 12, it's probably going to make it an integer because that's what it thinks it should be. If it's a 12.5, then it's going to make it a float because it thinks it should be a float. And then if you store that 12.5, which is a float, into your short, then the 0.5 will get truncated and it'll just be 12, which is what we want anyway. But sometimes it's something to think about. And if that does happen, then you need to use a parsing function to fix it, which I don't think we have time to look at today. But you can use parsing functions to fix your data types. That can happen in case it thinks x is, for example, a string. Maybe if at some point we put a word in here, and then later on we set x to be a number. The first time we declared x, we gave it text. So JavaScript thought that x was a string. And then we changed it to a number later, but it still thinks it's a string. So it's actually going to be string 12, not the number 12. So to fix that, you would have to use a parsing function, which is like not num to string, but whatever the opposite of it would be, string to num or something, or integer.parseInteger, I think is what it is. So that's just kind of a side note, but it's a common problem that people run into. So this will just let me attach 12 to short 2. So whenever I press this button, we get 12. The other important function is project.getTag. So it works very similarly, except that we need to actually do something with it. So project.setTag was more of a method that's doing something. It's storing a value into the tag. Project.getTag is the opposite. It's giving us a value, and we need to store it somewhere or use it immediately, or else it doesn't get pointed to. So we can always do that just by putting it into a variable. We can say var x equals project.getTag, and the only parameter we need here is the tag name. So I'm just going to put project.getTag short 1. Maybe it would make sense to call this S1 or something, so I remember what it is. So now whenever I execute this, it's going to take the value of tag 1, which is here, and store it into tag 2, which is here. So it's basically the same thing as a data transfer, but since we're using JavaScript, we can do stuff in between. So maybe I want to say S1 equals S1 plus 7. So this is how you can do some math in between using JavaScript. So I'll just make this a 3, and I still have my data transfer on actually, so that's why that turned into a 3. But anyway, when I press this, it's going to turn into a 10. So it should have stayed at 0, but the work that I did earlier kind of messed it up. You can also put a loop here or something else. Maybe an if statement, I think, would be a good example to show. So it works, just like Java or C++ or C. We can create a quick if statement here. We can say if S1 is greater than 5, then S1 equals S1 minus 5. Do something like that. So basically what this will do is it'll store the value of S1 into that number. If it's lower than 5, so it's a 4, it's just going to give us 4. But if it's 82, then it's going to go to 77 because it was above 5, so it's subtracted 5. So that's just a simple example. We don't have time to go through everything with JavaScript, but this is how you can pretty much do anything you would need to do, because once you obtain the value of a tag or set the value of a tag, you can just attach those tags to properties. So if I want to maybe make something bigger or smaller, make a shape here. So I have my rectangle, and the width of the rectangle can be a number. So I can make that short 2, which is the one I was setting. So this is now short 2, and when we start this off, short 2 is going to be 0, so this rectangle is going to be like invisible. But whenever I set that tag to be something else, we'll see the rectangle is going to get like really big. If I make this 100, well, not really big, but bigger. It is possible to edit these values directly without using JavaScript or without using the tags. Probably easier to use the tags, but if you want to reference a widget directly, you can use the project.getWidget action, which is page.getWidget. So this allows us to reference a widget by typing its name in quotes. So rect1, for example. So this gives us our rectangle. Much like with GetTag, we need to do something with it. So we could make a variable for the widget and use that as a reference to the widget. Similarly, we can reference a property of that widget by saying widget, or the name of the variable, whatever you call it, .getProperty. And I can use this to get the width, for example, which is what I was playing with. So if you click on width over here, you'll see it gives you a little bit of help. You can say get property width or set property width, and then you type in the number you want to set. So let's do set instead and set the width to be, I don't know, 200. You have to put a comma or it won't work. So the reason that did not work is because I forgot to check off the dynamic sizing or static optimization. So if I change this to dynamic, then it will actually let me change those properties using JavaScript. So it became bigger. So that is something you have to remember. If you want to change the properties at runtime, you have to change the static optimization. That's what this field actually does. The one last thing I want to show here before I run out of time is what happens if you make a syntax error. So let's say I mess up here and put like some typos. The compiler does not help you with this. So obviously we made a mistake and my script isn't executing, but we don't get any feedback, which can be a little bit of a frustrating thing, because if you make an error, you can see my stuff from above didn't execute either, although we wouldn't have seen it doing anything. my stuff from above it actually does execute, but whenever we get to the place where the error is, it just stops and shuts down basically. So something you can do for debugging is you can put in these little alert windows to tell you that you're here. So this is part of the script. Whenever I click the button, it says that I'm here. We can use that to say I made it this far in the script. I know that the error didn't occur before it, but then if I put this at the end here, I know that I'm after the error, so this alert isn't going to show up. And that's a really simple way to kind of zero in on where your error is in case